TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift's Malibu Moon, AP Indy's leading son and sire of 3 Grade 1 winners in 2017, led by undefeated Del Mar debutante winner Moonshine Memories.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Breeders' Cup alongside Joel Cunningham. I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, we have a lot of races to recap and a lot to preview. We have several winning your ends this weekend as we get closer to this year's Breeders' Cup. Let's go ahead and jump in here and start recapping some of these races. Let's start with the Oklahoma Derby. We saw 3-year-olds in here. You know, it was interesting. We saw Gervin. He was kind of, looked like he was going for a softer group. But Joel, I got to tell you, man, it was a pretty impressive win there for Untrapped.
Untrapped finally broke through. I mean, here was our live long shot in the Derby right now. He's a big price that day, ran terrible. I've chased this horse quite a bit. He meets the eyeball test with me. I mean, he's such a good-looking horse, and you've sort of seen that talent in spots with him. They try blinkers on and off. Well, you see a breakthrough performance here. You see the blinkers are off of him. He slips up the inside, and he's able to run down Battle of Midway. Had a little bit of a trouble trip, Battle of Midway did, but no excuses here. He beats him rather easily in the stretch. But like you said, the disappointing performance was Gervin. One thing about the Oklahoma Derby, and while we're showing this, I really felt like, you know, last time against 3-year-olds, and we've seen, you know, horses in the past come out of this and run back in that Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Gervin was number 2, if you remember, on that Dirt Mile top 5, the first one for me. He was terrible in this race, John. I really thought he would, you know, he would like 8 to 9 furlongs, late season 3-year-old. I gave him a pass for the Travers, coming off the big performance in the Haskell. He was a horse that, you know, he gets so far out of it, and he just didn't kick it in this race. I thought he was very flat. So Gervin, very disappointing for me to see him run that poor. Now, I thought he was a primetime Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile contender. I no longer feel that way now after this performance.
All right, let's talk now then about the Pennsylvania Derby. Joel, no surprise here for your winner. I think what's going to be interesting now will be the chatter about 3-year-old Champion, because now you see West Coast come in, see what he did in the Travers. Now you see what he did in the $1 million Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby. You know, people are going to start arguing. They're going to start saying Florida Derby, Kentucky Derby, you know, which one weighs out better. But let's talk a little bit about West Coast and the Pennsylvania Derby and another impressive performance.
Yeah, I think the fact that, you know, the only time that Always Dreaming and West Coast ran against each other, West Coast was so impressive in the Travers, and Always Dreaming on his own home track, getting let up from his own stall, ran poorly in there. And I know his form was tailing off by then, but I really believe the voters are going to lean towards West Coast now, particularly the recency of and how dominant he's been this second half of the year, John, as a 2-time Grade 1 winner now. I mean, look at him just put daylight on this field. Very unfortunate here, your runner-up, very courageous IRAP, you know, getting hurt after the race. This track took some casualties this weekend. I mean, let's be honest, cold front. Of course, so we're going to talk about that won the Gallon Bob. He also came out bad. So very unfortunate there, but just look at the separation from West Coast. Again, we talked about it last week. I mean, here's a colt now that's really grown into himself this summer. He's running 1s and 2s on the Raggers and Sheets, John, and he's winning so impressively. No 3-year-old is even touching him now. I really believe now with that trajectory he is on, he can be a contender against his stableman. He's going to run against 3 or 4 other Baffert horses that are older than him in that Breeders' Cup Classic. I think West Coast, watch out. If there's a 3-year-old can do it this year, he has the numbers to do it.
You know what's interesting is that we watched Bob Baffert a few years ago take Bodemeister, a horse that didn't have any 2-year-old form, and perform really well in the Kentucky Derby. And now you're starting to see that people are okay with taking some of these horses with less experience. Now you're starting to see this trend with Baffert where, look, this horse is not going to be ready for the Triple Crown Trail, but I'm okay with that. I'll just bring him in late. I'll win the Travers, I'll win this, and maybe go win the Breeders' Cup Classic 3-year-old Champion. Like, he looks like he kind of has a pattern. It'll be interesting to see if people start backing off of some of these 3-year-olds who just aren't ready for the Derby.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he came along too late. I mean, I think, you know, with the owners and Baffert, obviously we know what kind of horse he is now. I don't think was the same horse in the springtime. As a matter of fact, I watched him with my own 2 eyes in the Lexington Stakes get beat by a field that I think he would demolish now, John. And really had no excuses that day in the Lexington Stakes. So he's really coming along, really, the second half of the year. He's obviously mentally improved, filled into that beautiful big body of his. So I think, you know, he just was not a horse that developed in time like Bodemeister. I mean, he really came around. And look, Bob Baffert, people, let's not forget, he had probably the Derby favorite this year in Mastery before he got hurt. So Bob had a full deck earlier this year, even American Anthem before he disappointed. But now to see West Coast turn into what he's become, John, I mean, like, again, he's that Arrogate. I mean, Arrogate wasn't rushing the Triple Crown. I mean, he was nowhere. He was a latecomer, wasn't near ready physically, particularly physically and mentally. Had some setbacks, obviously a big horse. He's like West Coast. They're very similar stories now. I don't think West Coast is as good as Arrogate is, but he's pretty darn good, John. I tell you what, this isn't the greatest Breeders' Cup Classic field ever, particularly, you know, when you're thinking about Gunrunner having to ship out to the West Coast where, you know, he hasn't proven he can do that. These East Coast horses, you know, trying to acclimate out there. And then just look at the California horses. I mean, Arrogate isn't what he was last year, John. There is no California Chrome this year. So, in my opinion, West Coast can make an impact in that division.
All right, let's buzz through a couple more races from the weekend. Let's talk about the Cotillion real quick. What did you think of that performance?
You know, I thought It Tiswell got the trip and won it. You know, what happened was Abel Tasman did not break sharp at all. And Mike Smith had to make a major decision down the backstretch, and he gunned her for the lead prematurely like he did at Saratoga. It worked for him at Saratoga. He held off it late. It didn't work for him here. You see him along the inside here. And just not able to hold off It Tiswell, who got a much better forward trip, saving the ground, being up on that soft pace, and then able to finish, you know, after Abel Tasman made that middle move that I really feel like compromised her in here. The fact that you see lockdown there, a close third, it's a pretty nice filly. She was the pace setter. She'd never been on the pace in her life. I mean, so that shows you how moderate of a pace it was for her to end up on the lead in here. And because that pace was soft, she hangs around as a close third, even though these two fillies are probably better than her in terms of past performance.
All right, let's move on now to the Kelso. I think no surprise in here either. You know, this field kind of was a little light for a sprint division like this. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, you had Sharp Ass second. We talked about the Kelso last week. It's not a win and you're in now. Yeah. And it's a one-turn mile, which may not calculate, you know, may not translate as a proper prep for a two-turn Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile on the West Coast necessarily. So without the win and you're in tag, with the purse being what it was, you didn't see the allure. You didn't see the field take shape, in my opinion. I thought C. Mardini's had some gaps in his work tab. I'd have liked to seen him in here for Linda Rice. Didn't wind up going, and basically that gave it wide open to Sharp Ass Deca. If there wasn't any quality speed to go with him early in here and to really make him pay and try to fend off your closers in the deep stretch, it was all going to be his race to beat. At a mile, when he's able to control things, at a middle distance, he's one of the best horses in the country. And now he's probably going to be one of your favorites in that dirt mile, John. But I think he'll be vulnerable in there, depending on how that field shapes up. You know, he wasn't on my initial TCI dirt mile top 5. He probably will end up being there. But shipping over to the West Coast at Del Mar, two-turn dirt mile, that's a different ball game, and there'll be other speed in that race to go with him.
All right, one more race to talk about, and that's the Gallant Bob. You talked a little bit about it. It's unfortunate that what happened to your winner in there, Cold Front.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the race and what do you think, you know, what happens now moving forward?
I thought it was the same thing as we talked about with the Cotillion. I mean, I think clearly Cold Front used his tactical speed early and was able to outmaneuver the horse that I like, which was American Pastime in there, who was a very game runner-up. Now, American Pastime came to him. He's a horse that runs with his head up in the air. Looks like a bona fide 6-furlong type horse with a lot of talent. American Pastime, I still feel is interesting coming out of this. You know, going forward, races maybe like the Breeders' Cup Sprint, depending on how that field comes up, and maybe like the Malibu at the end of the year. I think there's a lot of talent there. Cold Front got the better tactical trip, finished off of. American Pastime looked like he was going to go by. You had to like the determination of Cold Front to re-break and finish off his rival there in the final 16th of a mile, but obviously breaks down after the race. Very unfortunate. Now, Cold Front probably, you know, may have a racing career. I'm not sure if they've determined whether or not he can come back or not, but it's at least good that they salvaged him, and he's not a horse that obviously had to pay the ultimate price.
Well, let's move now and talk about some racing this weekend. We have several winning your ins to talk about. Let's go out to California, and you were talking about that, you know, classic division out there. Let's talk about the Awesome again first. Yeah. As I mentioned, this is a winning your in. It's interesting in here. We see Moob Tahij, a horse that you've talked about, you know, quite a bit. It looks like he's running in here. Tell me, what do you think of his chances?
Well, full disclosure, we're shooting the show on Wednesday, so all these races have not been drawn yet. Moob Tahij, John, is a colt that, you know, we've talked about him. We picked him in the Belmont Stakes to beat your American Pharaoh. That's probably what he's best known for on this show a couple years ago, and he didn't get it done. Had a pretty good year last year for Kieran McLaughlin. He's getting a little older now. We know he's a good dirt horse from 1.125 to 1.25 miles. He's a world-traveled horse. Well, he's in the Bob Baffert barn, and it's been so for a few months now. Bob's got him into the program, And I've really liked his last 2 works. I'm not entirely sure. He's nominated, and I think he's possible for this race.
Okay.
If he runs based on his last 2 works I've seen on XBTV, where he's working with pretty nice horses like Opportunity and such, I've liked the way he's worked in his last 2. I think Bob has him ready. If he runs an awesome against Stakes, John, in my view, he's the horse to beat because he's going to run against a bunch of locals that we know a lot about already. That's Accelerate, Midnight Storm, and one horse shipping in that I think is a sneaky outsider is Breaking Lucky. I mean, a very good 1/8 horse. Again, he's not elite grade 1. He always runs into a bear when he hooks a grade 1 field, namely Gun Runner most of the time. But here's a horse, if you look at his past performances in some grade 1 races, he's been the bridesmaid quite a bit and he's run some good races. So if Move to Hege doesn't come back well, this is not a very good field. Watch out for Breaking Lucky in terms of a small upset play in here because I don't think this is the greatest awesome again.
All right, well, let's move now to the Vosburg. Tell me a little bit about this. I see Mr. Crow in here, a horse I'm not super familiar with. Tell me a little bit about who you think is going to win this race.
I love Mr. Crow. To me, he reminds me, he's a he reminds me a lot of American Pastime. He's by, the sire's escaping my name right now, the Gainesway Stallion by Tappet. Yeah, I want to say Tapiture, but it's not Tapiture, obviously. It's a horse that won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, but he's throwing great sprinters, John. When I look at just their action and body types at 6 furlongs, this horse is throwing tremendous sprinters. Mr. Crow is one. American Pastime is one. Mr. Crow's really impressed me with his last 2 performances. I know he's a 3-year-old facing elders and he's stepping up into grade 1 company. He's never even run in a grade stakes company before.
Right.
The fact Pletcher has him in this race, I think tells you everything you need to know about what he thinks of this colt. He's gotten a lot of buzz this summer. They've accelerated him and he's followed suit. He's knocked out top performance after top performance, fast time. He's the one I'm most interested in here because we're going to put that TCI top 5 in the sprint pretty soon, and he's one I'm eyeballing for close to the top spot because I think he's that good. Now, he's going to face some good elders in here. Jorge Navarro brought Sharp Aztec in to win the Kelso. This week, he brings El Deal in. You know, I think the Vanderbilt winner at Saratoga, very impressive. A horse with a ton of speed is going to have to, he'll probably be your favorite back here in the Vosburg. Takaful, another horse with a ton of speed for Godolphin, is another 3-year-old that's shown well this year. But I'm interested to see if Mr. Crow is as good as I think he is. To me, he's the horse I have my eye on.
All right, I'll throw a curveball here. We'll talk about a win and you're in for the turf. Let's talk a little bit about the Joe Hirsch. Tell me who you think is going to take down this grade 1.
You know, this is a wide open race, John. I mean, completely wide open. You have some Europeans coming over, you know, a horse like the Gray Gatsby. But, I mean, here's a horse that's 2 years removed from, you know, if this horse was in this race a couple years ago, he wins probably by daylight. His form hasn't been nearly as good. He hasn't won a race in a long time, John. He's the European to pay attention to in here. You also have some Americans, some 3-year-olds stepping up. Oscar Performance, he's got speed. Chad Brown has Beach Patrol in here. He's got speed. So I think there'll be plenty of contentious pace. You have Ascend trying to get in here, even though I don't think he's as good as a 1.5 miles as he is a 1.25 miles, in my opinion. The horse that interests me the most is Money Multiplier. Third off the layoff. He has that turn of foot. Again, this division's wide open and a touch weak right now. Money Multiplier, third off the layoff. I'll take him inside the 8th pole.
All right, let's switch now to the distaff, and let's talk about a race that's not a win and you're in, and that's the Belle Dame. But why we need to talk about it is Elate's in here. Tell me, what do you think of her chances?
I mean, you got to like how Elate progressed over the summer at Saratoga. Now, some horses are just Saratoga horses. Some horses hate the track, some horses love it. Maybe she was just a Saratoga lover because her form before her couple races at Saratoga wasn't very good. She was actually a very disappointing filly. I mean, a lot of people thought she was going to come into the year as a real Oaks type filly, and she's been disappointing. So I want to see her now carry that form to Belmont and show that she's really progressed and can carry that form to another racetrack, now face elders. I mean, she's not going to face great horses in here, John. I mean, this division is sort of falling apart this year. We've talked about it. Songbird's not around anymore. Forever Unbridled is training up to the Breeders' Cup Distaff, isn't even going to run in a final prep. You've got a couple nice fillies on the West Coast, but in terms of the East Coast, the older mares, they're just not there right now. They've all sort of gone to the sideline. So I think Elate can punch through here and earn a trip to Del Mar.
All right, let's talk now about a win and you're in, and that's the Zenyatta Stakes. You know, it's interesting. The last few years, we've kind of been spoiled when it comes to the Zenyatta because you've had some really good fillies in here. You know, this division, it's really changed with, you know, Beholder's out, Songbird's out. It's really kind of changed. Tell me, who do you think is going to be the superstar in this division?
You know, I still think Stellar Wind, you know, is probably the filly to beat. I mean, she's the filly we picked last year. Or I picked her. You picked the winner,
right?
Beholder. She's been disappointing in spots. She's 2 for 2 this year, facing Valdorian Grade 1 company on the West Coast. So right now, you'd have to say on her home track, you may give her just a slight edge on Forever Unbridled, even though I still have Forever Unbridled #1 in my TCI top 5. But when you look at the Zenyatta Stakes, John, again, it's sort of a disappointing prep. You may not get some of those mares back in here. Valdori skipping this race. Bafford's going to have Faithful in here, a clear second string type distaff. It has a lot of speed. And then Paradise Woods. I mean, you want to talk about, is there a horse that's been more disappointing in America than Paradise Woods? People were calling her Rachel Alexandra after the Santa Anita Oaks, and she's been nothing close to that. Flopped in the Kentucky Oaks, flopped in her comeback race at Santa Anita. Can the real Paradise Woods show up in the Zenyatta? Because this won't be a very good field. If she can show up here and get back to that Santa Anita Oaks form, then maybe she can be a Breeders' Cup Distaff player.
All right, let's switch now to 2-year-olds. You know, these are going to be the stars of tomorrow, but first they're going to run in this Breeders' Cup Juvenile. We have the front runner this weekend. It's a win and you're in for 2-year-old colts. Tell me, who do you like in this race? I know how much you love Bolt d'Oro, so tell me, you think he's going to get it done?
He's going to get it done. I mean, Baffert will throw something at him, and Baffert's always tough in this, I mean, track record-wise. But Baffert threw something at him in the Del Mar Futurity, and I think he threw a pretty good sprinter at him, a horse by the name of Zatter. Bolt d'Oro broke bad, had a wide trip on the turn, and still blew by Zatter inside the 16th pole. So now this horse is getting around 2 turns, which is what I think he wants. I have a hard time thinking Zatter going to have anything for him. If Baffert beats him, it's going to have to be with a colt like Solomini for Zayat Stables, a Curlin that may appreciate 2 turns. But realistically, I think his biggest competition is Tatters and Riches, who ran poorly in the Del Mar Futurity, but he's a big Union Rags out of an AP Indy mare. He ought to appreciate 2 turns as well. But look, let's face it. I think this will be a 1-horse race. This is Bolt d'Oro.
Well, I know our sponsor sure hopes it's going to be a 1-horse race.
That's right.
Big
He's going
news,
to Spendthrift.
Big news there with Spendthrift getting a nice 2-year-old and moving forward.
Man,
so hopefully for our sponsor, the horse runs really well.
That's a big horse.
Let's talk about the 2-year-old fillies now. We have the Chandelier. Before we talk about the Chandelier, though, let's go ahead and release a top 5 in the Juvenile Fillies division for
let's
TCI.
do it. You know, we've talked about the Colts, John. Let's talk about the Fillies and release our first TCI top 5 for the Juvenile Fillies of the season. And really, I'm only really looking at maybe 6 or 7 horses for this list. You know, I looked at P.D. Bianchi. We'll talk about her. She's going to run in the Chandelier. I looked a little bit at Moonshine Memories, who might be at the top of a lot of lists. But to me, I look at Moonshine Memories. They're going to train straight up to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies now. She looks like a sprinter to me, and she'll be on the lead. If you think she can go wire to wire in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, she might be your filly. In my opinion, she is not going to be a 2-turn horse. She'll be more of a sprinter in her future. So I went with horses, to me, that had 2-turn type profiles. Best Performance. She's the live long shot for me in this race. Broken Valve filly for West Point Thoroughbreds. She ran last time at Kentucky Downs, was runner-up in a listed turf stake there. She has graded stake form. She ran behind that nice filly, Dream It Is. I believe it was in the Schuylerville that began the Saratoga meet. I just think when you look at that pedigree, Broken Vow out of a Smart Strike mare, she's going to develop the further she goes. So I'm interested to see how she runs going a 1-turn mile in the Frizette. A little more ground, I think, is what she's looking for, and ultimately 2 turns. Separation of Powers. I think she's the filly to beat in the Frizette, no doubt about it. She got burned up in a speed duel last time out. Chad Brown, very talented filly, was the most impressive Saratoga maiden winner for fillies I saw. She's a filly to beat in there, and she has a pedigree to get 2 turns. Not sure if she'll do it or not. Maya Malibu, big, beautiful daughter, well-bred daughter, stamina all day in the female family. Is by Malibu Moon, obviously. Great connections there. I think she's going to continue to get better. I'm anxious to see her around 2 turns. She was your runner-up last time out in the Spinaway Stakes. You're going to either see her in the Frizette or the Alcibiades around 2 turns. To me, she's that late developing 2-year-old that belongs in the top 3. Amy's Challenge, the fastest filly, fastest 2-year-old in the country, 290 by her speed figures. But when I watch her run and I look at her pedigree, I think she may handle 2 turns. She doesn't look like as quick of a sprinter to me like Moonshine Memory does. She'll be interested to see in the Alcibiades next time out. And John, let's go with local horse. Let's go with Bob Baffert. The Breeders' Cup's at Del Mar. Right. I think his best 2-year-old filly in terms of the one that has the pedigree and the action to handle 2 turns is a filly by the name of Alluring Star. We'll see her in the Chandelier Stakes. And we'll find out this weekend if she deserves that #1 spot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's, you know, we release this, and then we get to see our #1 in action in there. She is going up against a filly named Spectator. This filly looked really talented at the beginning of the year. A little bit disappointing last time out. They say that she's doing great and ready to run, so it's going to be interesting to see. You think Alluring Star obviously is going to get it done in there.
I think Alluring Star is the filly to beat. Baffert has his other one in there, Just a Smidge, the Into Mischief. And now is out of a Tappet mare. I think, you know, maybe looks a little more like a one-turn type filly, but they're going to try her long. There's a potential she can handle 2 turns. P.D. Bianchi, your runner-up last time out behind Moonshine Memories, you know, was coming late. Again, when I look at her, she still looks to me like, you know, maybe a one-turn type. You know, I wanted to like her. I'm not convinced she'll be a 2-turn type filly is why she didn't make my top 5 there. And then Spectator, again, you know, Jimmy Creed out of a Henny Hughes mare. I mean, that's sprint on sprint. Very concerned about her moving forward as the distances get further as well. I think she'll be more of a sprinter. And look, this division has a lot of good one-turn 2-year-old fillies around the country, West Coast, East Coast. It's been hard to find a good, strong top 5 based on horses that you think can excel at a 1.16 around 2 turns. And at least the top 5 I have there are fillies I think can do that.
All right, well, thank you, Joel. Yep. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll look at these all these winning your ends, and we'll see who punches their ticket to this year's Breeders' Cup.